Welcome to the Medical Device Made Easy podcast. Here is Munir Al-Azouzi from easymedicaldevice.com. And today we wanted to talk about a certain article of the EU MDR, which is Article 16. This is an article where the MDCG guidance was released, and we wanted to talk about that because there was some surprises or some really discussion on that. And so for that, anytime there is some kind of conflict or discussion that we have to have on interpretation of a guidance, so we invite our lawyer. So I want to introduce you to Erik Vollebregt. So Erik, welcome to the Medical Device Made Easy podcast.
Thanks for having me again, Munir. I feel a bit like old furniture in the podcast right now, but let's see if I can still say something interesting about the subject, because it's a bit of a rabbit hole of a provision, I think, as we will no doubt discuss during this podcast.
Yeah, and just before the podcast, we still had some discussions because mainly there was some things that were not clear even for me. So now we clarified that. But as you say, it's really a rabbit hole. In the surface, we think that it's simple. It's a small paragraph. Everything is like, it's understandable. But few keywords that are used on this article change everything. So if I can say so. And after, because we discussed also about that during the last podcast episode on monthly review. So I explained to you a bit of what is included inside. And I had then some comments from some of the importers or distributors that are looking at this and say, now we should change our way to do this and that. And it's what we will try to explain to you today, because it's not so simple, or it's really complicated. So it's something that we really want to go. But Erik, can we just make maybe a first introduction of this article? What it is exactly? What are we talking about? Who is in scope of this article?
Yeah, well, that's always a good start, to start at the beginning, preferably with the end in mind. And for that, you have to look at the broader context of Article 16, because what we are talking about today is basically a translation and repackaging of devices. You have to see that in the larger context of Article 16 and the scope of the CE mark, because listeners may be aware that there's actually European case law in the field of precisely this situation. There was the Roche versus Servoprax case at the European Court of Justice some years ago, where there was a dispute between Roche Diagnostics and a distributor about whether the distributor needed a quality system for activities that would be in scope of Article 16, Section 2, as it's currently in the MDR.
Okay.
European Court of Justice at the time said, no, it's not necessary, because these devices have been placed on the market. They are freely circulating. So, as long as the changes that you make don't affect the quality of the product as such, and don't do terrible things to the trademarks of the trademark owner. So basically pharmaceuticals case law, pharmaceutical repackaging case law, then this is allowed. And that was the case law at that time. But now we had the MDR and the IVDR enter into force, and they provide for a much more specific regime that actually says, well, there are a number of criteria that you have to meet as a distributor. First of all, if you engage in repacking and translation, first of all, not to be seen as a manufacturer.
Yeah.
And if you are not seen as a manufacturer, then there is still a list of criteria that you have to meet. So, for example, you need to have a quality system for the activity. It needs to concern devices that are placed on the market. It needs to be necessary to do this in order to be able to place the device on the national market that you are doing this for, and some additional criteria. So it's a very complex provision with a lot of things nested in it. So that's basically the background in a nutshell.
So here we as we said, so mainly on Article 16 we talk about what you cannot do and what you can do to not become a manufacturer. So you cannot do that, and you can do that. And what you can do, as we say, is a translation of documents, It's also documents of IFU, the translation and repackaging. And here there is, and we discussed about that, as I said just before, there is kind of a border where we can say before that line, you are not on scope of Article 16. And after that line, you are on scope. So what is that line exactly? So when we can say, I am in it or I am out of it?
Right. Yeah, so Article 16 concerns devices that have been placed on the market. So Article 16(1)(c), which is the starting provision for the rest of the article as we're going to discuss it. And that says that you become a manufacturer if you modify a device already placed on the market in such a way that compliance with the applicable requirements may be affected. If you modify a device that hasn't been placed on the market, yeah, no problem, because it hasn't been placed on the market. And the basic thought of CE marking legislation is the device should be compliant when placed on the market. What you do before, not a problem.
So then article... there is maybe a clarification on, maybe people don't, maybe I know a lot of you know about that, but what means placed on the market? And we talked about that in a previous podcast, but there are some specific entities that can place a device on the market. Not everybody can do that. So, and specifically, there is one where there is this discussion specifically here.
Yeah. No, it sounds a bit like a riddle.
Exactly.
Oh, sorry to be cheeky, because we had this pre-discussion. But no, I mean, there are in the CE marking system, there are only two parties that can place a device on the market: the manufacturer and the importer. And the importer only is in the mix when the manufacturer is not established in the EU himself. So then you can get into interesting questions about when an importer changes things to a device. Is that in scope of Article 16 in the first place? And it can be, for example, that an importer changes things to a device that has not been placed on the market yet. So, and that would be called in the scope of Article 16. For example, let's say you have an importer of a multinational company. So manufacturers in China or the US, like it often is. There's an importer in Germany, let's say. Importer receives goods, devices, puts them in his warehouse. But these devices, it's not clear for each device whether the device is actually going to be sold in Europe, because this part of the stock can go to anywhere in the EMEA. So that can be Europe, can be Middle East, can be Africa. By the standards of the concept of placing on the market, as it's explained in the Blue Guide, I hope everybody has read the Blue Guide by now, the product is not necessarily placed on the market because there is no intent to distribute it. It hasn't been made available in the EU because it can still go anywhere. And that means that the device is not placed on the market. So if you were to change anything to the device as an importer at that time, it's not in scope of Article 16. And this is mainly a problem for multinational companies or distributors that engage very much in parallel import and export through the European Union, or through the Union with a capital U. But yeah, there's also a large part of the market that won't be affected by that. But still, you always have to start with the question: has this product been placed on the market? Because if it hasn't been placed on the market, then I can't apply Article 16.
So I suppose there is a lot of importers that are now maybe being relieved because of this. I'm not on this then.
They should always know whether a device that they have under their control, whether it's placed on the market or not. Because if it's placed on the market, they should already have done the Article 13 importer checks. So if an importer cannot be in doubt, so to speak, about the status of the device, because if the device is actually placed on the market and they only do the importer checks afterwards, then they're doing things backwards, then their quality system doesn't work correctly. and it would be contrary to Article 13. Yeah.
So we discussed also about something about a certain wording that was used, which was necessary in order to market the device in the relevant member state. So
yes,
here there are things that are necessary, so you have to do them, and think that it's not necessary, but you can still do them. It's not like it's not mandatory. It's not forbidden to do that, but you can still do that. So what is the status of this, if I can say, or the meaning of this for our audience here?
Yeah, it's also an interesting provision, because many people think that that Article 16, Section 234 about labeling and repacking, that it applies always to any kind of labeling or repacking activity in the supply chain. But that's a mistake, because these Article 16.2, which is the starting point for that let's say customer journey, so to speak, only applies insofar as the change made to the IFU or the change to the documentation accompanying the device or to the pack is necessary in order to be able to market the device in the member state concerned. This is also a criterion that comes from pharmaceutical trademark parallel importation case law, where a number of these cases were defined. For example, one of the cases that I remember is a case where certain pills were, for example, sold in strips that were that contained pills in a quantity that they were not reimbursable under the reimbursement system of the member state concerned. But if you would make it into smaller strips, then they would be reimbursed. So that was, for example, considered a circumstance that that would make it necessary.
Okay.
So let's say, for example, you've got certain devices that are only sold by a box of 100.
Yeah.
And you want to sell them in boxes of 10 in Greece or in Finland, then, and they're only sold in Germany, for example, then you could say, okay, well, if it's necessary to get reimbursement in those countries by having boxes of 10 or smaller, then, then I would have a justification to do this. But if you don't have a justification like that, then theoretically, you would not fall within the scope of Article 16.2a or b, and you would also infringe Article 16.1c, and you are a manufacturer if you do it. That's actually kind of important. Yeah.
And so, as we said, so if you are in scope of Article 16, so here I hope now people are clear on who is on scope, and if you are on scope following your processes, you have then to involve notified body, apparently, from what we see here. This, I think, is a big concern for some of the for importers or distributors that are in scope of that. So there was this MDCG guidance 2021-23. I will put that again on the show notes. That was trying to explain the relationship between manufacturers and notified bodies. And when you read that, I mean, there is a lot of things that maybe people were not aware of until they read this guidance. So what exactly is the point of having a notified body for Article 16 here?
Well, good question as well. The point is basically that the MDR and the IVDR view the activity in Article 16.2, so translation and repacking, contrary to the case law of the European Court of Justice that we had before the date of application of the MDR. It is seen as a quality system controlled activity, subject to notified body surveillance. That's how the MDR sees it. And that means that you need a notified body. It's important, and there was a lot of course, when in 2017, the text of the MDR and the IVDR were final, a lot of people started wondering but hey, how does it work with the notified body in this provision? What is the notified body supposed to do exactly? What should be in the certificate? all these things. And there was quite a lot of confusion. I know that Team MB at some point was working on discussing whether they could come up with a sort of template certificate for this business. Until in 2020, I think in August, I don't know exactly the number of that MDCG document again. There was a Q&A about Annex 7.
Okay.
And in that Q&A, it said, hey, by the way, about Article 16 certification, that is not conformity assessment. So that means that we, as an MDCG, we have nothing to do with it actually within the scope of conformity assessment, and notified bodies actually can stop being uncertain about what the nature of that certification activity is. They can just go ahead and do their own certification on the standards of that provision.
But one thing that was a bit confusing is the fact that as they are looking just at the quality management system, not at specifically at the product itself. Why they have not chosen just to get that from a conformity assessment body? So somebody that is just coming from ISO 13485.
Yeah, it was still quite unclear because because ISO 13485. That is a standard about production of medical devices. And although of course you can also do this within an ISO 13485 certified quality system, that is actually not the standard. So that was also one of the points on which there was a lot of confusion. At some point, I've also heard some companies that said, yeah, you know what? We don't need a notified body. Because it's not conformity assessment, we will just go to our local ISO 13485 certification body. Exactly. And they can certify us for this activity, of which I said at the time, well, that's probably not what it says in the MDR and the IVDR, because the MDR and the IVDR is a bit on the fence. On the one hand, they say it's not conformity assessment.
Yeah.
On the other hand, they say you do need a notified body. So not just any certification body in scope of ISO 17025, but moreover, you need a notified body that actually has been designated for the scope of the devices that you are repacking or translating the IFUs from.
And I think this made afraid a lot of importers or distributors, because we know the situation with notified bodies. I have also some customers that are trying to contact them now, and they cannot reach even the reception. They cannot reach the person there. So it's like a bit afraid. And they are saying, okay, maybe this will stop our business, because if we need a notified body and they are taking time to audit us, etc., and coming, so what are we doing here?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's of course, that's a bit of a consequence of the system, that if you are going to require that you go to a notified body that has been notified for that scope, if you have a very exotic product for which not many notified bodies have a scope, and then also you only want this certification of your quality system and nothing else, then it is really difficult as a distributor or an importer that is independent to go to a notified body now and say, hey, will you certify this? Yeah, for a lot of notified bodies, this is actually not a very interesting activity.
Exactly. Yeah. But one thing, just maybe one thing, so I don't know, but is it applicable as of the 26th of May 2021? Or what is, because they have no certificate now, so it's like it's a new thing. So the importers, distributors don't have a certificate. So now, can we say that it should be applicable now? So now they have to have this certificate and everything, or there is some timeline here?
Well, there's not a transitional regime in the MDR for Article 16 activities.
So now they have to have it.
Yeah, basically, if you engage in the activity, you should have a certificate for that by now. The only thing that you can do actually is, and that's probably a bit cheeky, but still possible, is that if you repackage or translate the IFUs of legacy devices, that is another matter, because for legacy devices, it is still undecided at the highest level whether articles 13, 14, 15, 16 apply to legacy devices or not.
Okay.
And what we see is that member states also actually differ in opinion about that. What I've seen is that member states are not actively enforcing this. So what you could actually, if you are a distributor or an importer and you're doing this for legacy devices, and somebody says, hey, you're not allowed to do this, then at least you can play the uncertainty card and say, well, yes, actually I can, because it is still up in the air whether Article 120, Section 3
is applicable for legacy devices.
Adhere to Article 16 or not.
Yeah.
So you've got plausible deniability there.
It's interesting here because I think there is still we talk about that, and there is this MDCG guidance, but there is still some, as I've said, it's a rabbit hole, so there is still maybe more to dig, more to go, more to find, more to interpret, and it's really something that I suppose a lot of
devices, I think you're stuck with Article 16. There's no reason not to do it. Except, of course, that, I mean, and that's probably tragic if you're not able to get certified because no notified body is interested in doing this. Yeah, then you're basically running into the problem that a lot of companies are running into these days, and that is that if you leave this kind of certification to the market, then it is built into the system that if the market doesn't want to perform the certification activity or doesn't have the capacity to do so, that you're basically out of luck as a company that wants to engage in an activity that needs to be certified. Actually, recently I had this actually confirmed by a competent authority that said, but the certification by notified bodies, it is a market activity, and if there are any big problems, it's basically for the market to sort it out and for the authorities to put framework conditions for it.
Because if we don't have a notified body, let's say it's not the fault of the notified body. I mean, it's not, they are not designated, they didn't come, etc. So then you have to deal with the competent authority in the background if there is any issue mainly. But what is
your best bet, I think, as a distributor and importer, if you cannot get a notified body to do this and you still want to do this commercially, I mean, a national competent authority will be able to give you an exemption for just about anything.
Exactly.
So what you could also do is just collect a stack of rejections from notified bodies and then send them to the competent authority with a cover letter saying, I really want to try to do this. I have completely complied with all the quality system elements in Article 16.3 as explained in the MDCG, but I can't get a notified body to certify me. So I'm inviting you to come and audit me. I'm inviting you to come and inspect me. But that's about as good as it gets. And then hope that they don't enforce against you, because formally it's not their problem that there isn't a notified body that wants to certify your quality system.
Yeah.
Which is kind of tragic.
Yeah, I can see that. As soon as we are willing to do this activity of repackaging or relabeling, it's marked also in Article 16.4 that you have to contact your notified body or competent authority 28 days prior to do this activity. Yes. So does it mean that first you are certified and then you can do this activity, and each time you do this activity, you inform the authorities? Or it's like you can continue to do your business, but if you plan to do this kind of relabeling or repackaging, then you need to get this certificate, you need to get all that. So what is exactly the point here?
Well, that's a good question, because it depends on first of all, I think it depends on the scope of the certification that you get, which is set out in MDCG 2021-23. I'm just looking over my shoulder at my other screen with the text on it.
Okay.
Because if you look at because what happens in the end is it is a certification of your quality system.
Yeah.
But the problem there is that the MDCG guidance says the activities that are certified should be linked to the above mentioned specific types of devices covered by the quality system. So your quality system needs to concern specific devices. So it needs to be specific in which devices it covers. So you can get certified by it. If you have a general quality system that says I can repack anything from pacemakers with animal tissue coating to I don't know, bricks or something like that, then the notified body will say, yeah, sorry, that's not specific enough. So there's that. Then,
but how can you be specific on importation, distribution of any device? I mean, a device is on the box. I'm not opening the device to use it. I'm just relabeling or repackaging. So how can you be specific on this or that?
Specific whether it concerns, for example, pacemakers or catheters or I don't know. Tongue spatulas or
but should I write on the quality management system or the quality manual the scope of my activities and say I'm doing that specifically for that, and no need maybe to explain on the repackaging that I'm repackaging specifically pacemakers? Or it's you have to have the wordings or the vocabulary of which products you are repackaging or translating?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the notified body can check whether your quality system is adequate for that. Because let's say, for example, I'm repackaging, I don't know, let's say collagen-coated catheters.
Yeah.
You need another quality system for that are sterilized, that have a sterilized primary packaging. Yeah, that you need another quality system for that than when you are repackaging, let's say, stethoscopes. Right? Because stethoscopes are not sterilized, they're pretty sturdy, and so on. So different requirements.
Okay.
And then to get back to your question about the 28 days, when that starts to run, what you need to do is you need to inform the manufacturer of your intent, and you need to show them a mock-up of the repackaging. So basically, if you that would mean that, and also the authorities, by the way. So what you need to do is you need to enable 2 third parties to actually see what you are going to do to what specific devices, specific types of devices. So that means that it might be that you need to notify one manufacturer, I'm going to repackage these specific dental splints from you, and another, I'm going to translate the IFU for these specific substance-based devices of you. And also you need to send it to the competent authorities. So every time you add a new SKU, let's say, to your process, you need to notify the authority and the manufacturer for that product 28 days in advance before you actually engage in the activity. Now, the problem is that this notification provision is, I think, spectacularly unclear, and it's also not so nice that they didn't provide any guidance on that in the MDCG guidance, because now you are in a situation that basically the provision says 28 days before you engage in the activity, you have to notify the manufacturer and the local authority. And if they ask for it, you have to send them a mock-up, period. What happens then? Well, usually the manufacturer will send you back a letter saying, how about no, you cheap-ass parallel importer? Screw you, you're not doing this. So what then, right? I mean, the provision doesn't say that. Also, because the provision doesn't basically say what the competent authority needs to do, that's also an interesting one, because that means that the national provision is completely open, which means that every member state can have their own provision for it. There may be a member state that says, if you just notify us, then this is fine. Send us a picture of the mock-up. It might also be that the member state says, no, you have to notify us, but you cannot engage in the activity until until we have actually given you permission to do so.
Yeah.
And we also require a physical 3D mock-up. Thank you very much.
Okay. So this is, as you said, this is up to each competent authorities to decide that for now, which again opens the door to say that we thought that MDR was more for harmonization of everybody, but apparently not. It's more like each competent authority can work on that. But yeah, it feels. I mean, for me, when I look at that, it feels like a lot of burden to importers or distributors that are doing this activity. They have to contact this, they have to do that, where maybe before they never had any contact with any competent authority or any notified body. They don't have the right personnel, the right department, the right people to help them on that, maybe. So now it's changing a bit their scope of work, actually.
The regulatory burden for this activity has gone up immensely, I think. And this is, of course, something you can have different views on. Because on the one hand, you could say, just like the argumentation was in this Roche Servoprax case, for example, well, of course, it is necessary that you have a quality system for these activities because, hello, we manufacture when we package a device for the first time or when we make an IFU for the first time, we also have a quality system. So it's not very strange that you need a quality system. And you get a quality system light actually because the requirements are less than for a production quality system. Also, I think if you look at translation processes at manufacturers in scope of Annex 9 in production, then your translation is actually, it's also a quality controlled activity. And if you have a shitty translation consistency process, then a notified body will write you up for it. And I've actually had cases on my desk where a parallel importer had actually really badly translated the original IFU, instructing users to do things that were actually pretty dangerous, to leave the device in place a lot longer than you actually should. With potential big chance of infections.
Yeah.
So it's not like they are making this up for fun. The only problem is that what we see in the NDR in a lot of places is that first they were here in terms of regulatory burden, and now they're over there.
Yeah.
If you are a class 1 medical device software company and you were like, I had my nice class 1 self-certified software device under the MDD, and now it turns out that it's cancer diagnosing, treatment plan predicting, artificial intelligence, and you find yourself in class 3. Yeah, that's kind of a big steep hurdle to take from a regulatory perspective. So this is also one of these things where the NDR and the IVDR really move the goalposts on specific activities.
And as we said, and to add to all this, you have to contact, as we said, the notified body, but you have to contact it if it has the scope of the devices that you are distributing or importing. So the scenario that we can have is mainly that we start to distribute maybe some catheters, I don't know, and then we take a notified body, and 3 months later, we have a manufacturer that contact us to distribute some MRI machines or whatever, and then it's not on the scope of the first notified body. So then it means that we will have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 notified bodies per the products we have on our stock.
Looking at the same quality management system or overlapping parts of the same quality system and management system,
So it's, I mean, when we start to read all what they have to do for doing this activity, my thing is to say, and I said that on my previous podcast, say don't do that at all. I mean, it's not like it's easy. It's really looking like a difficult process for importers or distributors. So, do you have the same conclusion? Like, if you can don't do that, or give that directly to the manufacturers to do it?
I would say do it specifically, because you can see that the EU has made the policy change to depart from the server-prox case law saying any device placed on the market that you don't basically adulterate in the process of repacking or translation is basically you can do whatever you like the way you like it. They went to a situation where they said, well, we are going to make it look more, align it to the pharmaceuticals parallel import and trademark case law in order to basically, align these things. And then they also added on top the notified body quality management system certification, which does make this activity more complex. But on the other hand, it also, if you look at it from a safety perspective, it also makes the processes much more safe. So in the end, you could say, and also it limits these processes to not to the cases where you see a commercial advantage, but to the cases where actually you need to do this. So there's also, in order to be able to sell the product in a particular member state. So there's also a proportionality criterion built in. And I think this is of course, can really impact on the business model of certain distributors.
Yeah, and it's
policy choice.
Yeah, it's mainly what we are saying. So it's important to do that. As you said, there is really an impact on the patients outside because, as you said, you have the manufacturer that already has all the quality management system. He went through a notified body. He showed them what he will be presenting on the market, all the indication, all the elements that are right inside. So it's kind of approved by a notified body. And if the next company, the importer, is doing some changes without having a control from someone, it can be a big problem also here. So it's why I think it's really important.
It's a bit of there's more of an emphasis, you could say, generally in the MDR on good distribution practices. This is also what you see in guidances from competent authorities on distribution of medical devices. So it's just that this is also seen as a quality controlled activity. And I think also as if you're a responsible distributor of medical devices and you want to even keep all your obligations under Article 14, it's really a good idea to have a good quality system anyway that you can fit this into.
And it's mainly also, as I said, the difficulty here is the fact that having a quality management system, I think we all understand, and it's really something that is needed. Here, it's more about for the nature of the work of those distributors or importers. Mm-hmm. They are dealing with multiple products, and here the big risk is dealing with multiple notified bodies. When if you had only a conformity assessment body that is coming just for ISO 13485 or ISO 9001 or ISO quality management system, if I can say, then they can maybe relate on that. But I completely understand also that each product is different. I mean, having a quality management system for a pacemaker or for a wheelchair or for a spatula or whatever, it's completely different. So you have really to have the right system for each of the products and for the storage, for transportation, for repackaging, for all this. And I think it's really something that is important. So I hope really that I mean, I try to make the devil advocate and put some of the questions that the manufacturer are asking. So I hope that now people really understand why this is in place and what they have to do, and the fact that it should be applicable by now. And we discussed here about the legacy devices that maybe there is still some discussions about that, but there is no transition period for this Article 16. So it's something that you have really to consider as soon as possible, because otherwise maybe you can be not non-compliant, so placing devices on the market in a non-compliant way. So this is really something that I think will, I hope, help everybody. So is there anything else from your side that maybe we missed or we didn't talk about today here?
We missed it. It's written in my book where I have a large section on the application of Article 16. So that's good. Otherwise, what did we miss? I mean, we could have gone into a lot of detail discussing the MDCG document on Article 16, Section 4 certification. But it's a very detailed document, which largely also applies to notified bodies, telling notified bodies what their certification scheme should look like, what the certificate should look like. And the amount of guidance to manufacturers is actually, to distributors is actually really not that much. Yeah, there's a section that says that this is what your quality system should look like, and these are the elements that should be in there. That's section 3. But that's the most important part for the market. So, and I think. The quality elements that they ask, they're not so totally weird, except that that they also contain the normal requirements that companies can also sometimes get wrong procedurally. Like, for example, has the resource management being defined properly? Is it properly documented which premises are going to do the repacking? Is the procedure is that specific for the place where you're going to do it? Also, a very important one that I think is easy to forget is that you need to have a procedure where you are informed of corrective action taken by the manufacturer.
Okay.
So if the manufacturer takes corrective action to remedy a problem with respect to the device that may impact on your activities, then you need to know about it. So let's say, for example, you've got a translation, you're doing translations, then you need to have a process to ensure that's what it says, to know that when the manufacturer implements a corrective field safety corrective action with regards to the IFU, for example, I don't know, they remedy a particular usability aspect in order to limit the risk of user error, you need to know about it. And you need
because you have to retranslate.
And you have to retranslate. And this is a tricky one, because how are you going to do that?
Yeah. And it's as we said, it's really something that is really managed by a quality management system, by people that are really trained to do that, and we have really to put in place all the possibilities that are happening here. What I would maybe ask the people that are listening to that, so if you have some specific questions, please send that to me at info@easymedicaldevice.com. And the idea is mainly that if I get enough questions, I can maybe do again a session with Erik, and we can try to go through those questions, maybe during a live also. It's maybe something that we can do also during a live, so that we can really answer all your questions. Because I think here, as we said, we just looked at a small piece of everything, so we didn't deep dive on everything. So it's why it's maybe important that we can answer all your questions. So if you have questions, please send me an email at info@easymedicaldevice.com, and I will gather them, and then we can discuss again with Erik what we can do to answer all those questions. Is this something that is fine for you, Erik?
Yeah, no, that's fine. Perfect. Yeah, because I mean, to me, it feels that we only have one foot in the rabbit hole that is Article 16 so far. So,
exactly. So let's wait for everybody to answer that. Great. So, Erik, really was a pleasure. I think, I hope, it was really helpful. And for everybody that is listening to this episode, so please don't forget to go on the YouTube channel maybe, and just to put a comment and say that you liked it, because it helps also to raise, if I can say, the video for the people that are searching for this kind of topic. And if you are listening that on your podcast, so please also don't hesitate to share that with your colleagues that are really needing maybe to understand and to hear about the topic that we talk about here on the podcast. Okay, Erik, so really it was a pleasure.
This is a good podcast. It's really good information that otherwise is not that easy to come by. So
exactly. Thank you. I'm really trying to make it easy for everybody. So yeah, I think I hope it's really helpful for everyone to understand all what we are talking about here. Okay, Erik. So really, thank you very much, and I wish you a nice day.
Likewise, Monier. Always a pleasure.
Bye-bye.